So what happened? Benny Silverblum and I went to the city to try to find a job, get ourselves some jobs in the summer.
You had gotten thrown out of the bakery.
Huh?
You had gotten thrown
before.
Out.
No, it was before. So we were told we could get a job working as bellhops in a place up in Fallsburg. So I went home. My father said to me, "No way, you are not going away from the summer. You're working in the bakery." Right? And I was very unhappy about it because I wanted to go. So what happened was I had to go work in the bakery. My father had this wonderful cake baker. It was a conditor. It was fancy, did all the fancy cakes and shit. And I was going to be his apprentice, the sorcerer's apprentice. And so he started, he knew I wanted to go away, you know. I was not very happy yet. My father must have told him the story that I would want to go away. And somehow he looked at me and said, "You don't like working here. You don't want to work with me." I never worked with nobody. I hate the bakery. I hate my father. I hate my mother. I hate everybody. Right? So he says, "Okay." He says, "Watch this." Right? He said, "You little son of a bitch, get out of here. I don't want you working. I don't want this kid around here. He did me a favor. Threw me out of the bakery to my father. He said, "If he comes work here, I'm leaving. I don't want him in here. Get him out of here. He fucks up everything. He does everything bad." Right? He threw me out. Did me a great favor. He did it purposely. Right? And then he looked at me, smiled, right? And my father goes, "Oh, get out of here. You're going to have to leave." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to go up to the mountain. I got a job. I'm going to leave." And I left. And I got myself a job and worked up in the mountains as a bellhop. First, I started maybe the first 6 weeks it was the bellhop. So 5 weeks it was a bellhop. And then the guy who was the social director got left or I got drafted or something.
And you were doing something other than a bellhop?
I was also cleaning cars, and I was doing I was bringing the coffee and tea to the games. I was running everything.
But weren't you also doing something for the stage manager or something?
No, this little game later on.
Okay.
Well, they had a show every. They had it once a week. They had a staff show. So I used to do that in the staff show. We did different things. You had to do that. You also had to dance with the. You had to come out every night. You had to dance with all the girls who came up there. It was part of it, right? Yeah. And everybody was a student at college. You had to lie a little bit. Right? And I was tall. I was big. And at that point, I would have screwed a snake if I saw it coming by. It was a wonderful summer for me. But I remember all I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a night or 3 hours a night because at 6 o'clock in the morning you were up getting ready for breakfast. You had to do the breakfast thing. But, you know, not the breakfast thing, but you had to go. You got to go to work. You had to go eat your breakfast at 6 o'clock, and you had to go to work. And then what else happened? Then it was all right. It was fun. And then like 4 weeks or maybe 5 weeks into the summer, this kid was drafted in the thing. He was the social director, and he said to me, "Look, Jack, you can. Everybody likes you. Everybody, you know what has to happen. You know, why don't you take the job? I'll give you the job. We'll get somebody else a bellhop job. I'll give you. You know." I said, "Well, I was getting tips. I was making $35, $40 a week, which was a lot of money. Plus, I had a free room and board and everything else." And I remember I brought my mother up. They made a deal also so my mother could come up. She spent a week up there. I paid for that of my own money at that time. And she had a great summer. She came up for a week. Then I got myself, they gave me a social director's job. Instead of sleeping down underneath the building in bins, that would look like terrible wooden, terrible dank places where they kept. I got a room in the social hall, down below in the social hall. I had a room for the social director. I had an office in the room. So I used to book all the shows. And I knew what to do. I became like a natural thing. And somebody heard that I had done that. I think they offered me a job to be working for the next summer in the next place. That I would come over
to. So you were the first place you worked in, which one?
It was a place in Fallsburg.
Fallsburg.
Yeah.
And
it was Mays Rockridge, it was called.
Mays Rockridge.
And then I went over to...
the Pines?
The Pines, Laurel and the Pines.
Laurel and the Pines.
That's Laurel's, that was the Novak family. So you had heard that I did a great job. I was young, I wasn't in the Army or the Navy.
Right.
They needed somebody to come to do the social director's job. And they offered me $100 a week. which was a lot of money, big bucks.
How old were you now?
16, 17. 17, I guess, maybe 16. I was 16 first year, 17 the second year. And then I went into, right after that,
so you got this job as a social director. And what kind of acts did you book? Do you remember any?
Well, I worked through, most of the names that were working at that time was big names. I used to, Charlie Rapp was the guy that basically was the booking agent I used to work through. And it was what was Jan's last name? Jan Pierce was one of the guys who sang it, was a singer, was an opera singer. But there was also, I'm trying to think of some of the other
comedians?
Comedians, a lot of comedians.
You don't remember any?
Well, if I go back, I can remember. But there was, a lot of them. It wasn't Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis came later on. And Dean Martin, they were in the 60s, or actually in the 50s. But it was good. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. But we had shows. We had also, there was a group of other people, the actors that used to come through, and they had shows once a week for them. And, but it was a different life at Laurel's on the Pines. It was an uptown place. It was a very, Tito Ponte used to be there. I don't know if you know who he is. Usually Mambo Kings, he's in it. Right? Well, it used to take Tito, we used to throw him in the pool. He used to get high. He was the one that put the dope around for everybody. Cuban. And he was a Cuban, right? And we used to throw him in the pool all the time, right? Once a week he used to get dumped in the pool. And Tito baby, Titi baby, we used to call him.